Welcome to the learner listening right now to another deep dive. And today we have a really fascinating mission.
We really do. I'm excited for this one.
Yeah, because we're looking entirely at J.R.R. Tolkien's The Return of the King. But, we're not just looking at it as a standard classic fantasy novel.
Right. We're bypassing the usual, elves and orcs, surface level stuff.
Exactly. Our mission today is to explore this book strictly from a conservative evangelical perspective. Like, how can this specific story deepen your faith?
Mm-hmm.
How can it help you understand the Bible more profoundly and really just inspire you to live for Christ in your daily life?
Yeah. And to do that, we're drawing on a huge stack of sources today. We've got thematic analyses, literary critiques, and some really beautiful Christian devotionals based on the book.
Right, and there's this central paradox we're going to be teasing out the whole time, which is, how does a fantasy story featuring wizards and hobbits actually offer like one of the most profound gospel-shaped reflections on grace that we have in modern literature?
It's wild to think about, right? A story about an imaginary world teaching us about true sacrifice and hope in a dark world.
It really is. And, you are the absolute perfect guy to help us unpack all these deep theological resonances that are just hidden beneath Tolkien's mythic landscape. So let's just jump right in. Let's start at the top, literally with the title of the book.
The Return of the King.
Yeah. What does that phrase actually mean for a Christian reader? Because, we hear king and we immediately think of worldly leadership.
Oh, totally. We think of pyramids of power, dominance, coercion, building the highest wall, holding the biggest sword. But this story and a biblical worldview flips that entire pyramid upside down.
Okay, so break that down for us, because we have Aragorn, right? He's this long-delayed king returning to the throne of Gondor.
Right. And Gondor has been waiting for a king for centuries. They've been ruled by stewards, and it's just been this long, slow, agonizing decline. So when Aragorn finally returns, it's this massive motif of restoration. But, and this is the key, it's about how his authority is validated.
Because he doesn't just show up and demand power, right?
Exactly. He doesn't just wave a family tree around and bring a huge army to the gates of Minas Tirith to claim the throne by force.
Which is exactly what the steward Denethor expects him to do.
Right. Denethor operates purely on worldly power dynamics, but Aragorn's authority is validated by his capacity to heal. There's that famous line from the old wife in the city, Iareth, who says, "The hands of the king are the hands of a healer."
Oh.
Yeah, so Aragorn's kingship isn't about dominance, it's about putting broken things back together. And this is a direct typological reflection of the Old Testament, specifically the Davidic Covenant in 2 Samuel 7.
Wait, okay, let me push back a little or just trace that connection for me.
Yeah.
Because David was, an established king in a palace in Jerusalem. Aragorn spends most of his life as this homeless, dirt-stained ranger in the woods. How do those align?
That's a great question. It's all about the source of the authority. So in 2 Samuel 7, David tells the prophet Nathan, "I'm going to build God a physical house." He wants to use his human resources and royal power to establish God's presence.
Right.
But God reverses it. He tells David, "No, I'm going to build you an enduring house, a dynasty." God roots true kingship in divine election and perpetual grace, not in temporal power or military conquest.
So it's totally different from the kings of the surrounding nations back then who just held power through violence.
Exactly. And the Hebrew words here are really important. You have Melech, which means king, and Mashiach, which means anointed one. Aragorn represents this biblical hope of a coming Mashiach who restores shalom, peace, and wholeness.
He waits on providence. He serves in obscurity for decades before he's exalted.
Yeah, and you see that covenantal restoration perfectly symbolized in the White Tree of Gondor. Under the worldly stewards, the tree is this dead, barren stump. But when Aragorn is crowned, they find a new sapling blossoming.
Oh man, that is a direct echo of Isaiah 11.1 of the branch sprouting from the dry stump of Jesse.
Yes. The Hebrew word there is amas, meaning branch or sprout. The dead stump is the failure of human leadership, and the blossful tree is the restorative grace of the true king.
But, playing devil's advocate for the listener here, I can hear someone saying, okay, this is neat symbolism, but Aragorn isn't Jesus. It's just a story. Like, how does reading about an imaginary king actually help me, as a Christian, love the real Christ more deeply?
I love that you brought that up, because Tolkien himself hated strict allegory. He was very clear that Aragorn does not equal Jesus.
Right.
But what a story like this does is it tunes our imagination. We get so used to worldly leadership, corporate power grabs and dominance, that we kind of domesticate the servant leadership of Christ. We turn it into a buzzword.
Yeah, servant leader is just a corporate seminar topic now.
Exactly. But when you read about Aragorn's long years of obscurity, his suffering, his willingness to serve ungrateful people and walk the terrifying paths of the dead just to fulfill an oath, it brings Philippians 2 to life.
The humiliation and exaltation of Christ.
Right. It bypasses our intellectual defenses and makes us feel the beauty of a king who washes feet. Or, in Aragorn's case, a king who crushes Athelas, leaves in a hospital room to heal the sick. It trains our hearts to actually desire the true King of Kings.
That is so good. It just completely reframes how we read the Gospels.
Yeah.
But okay, if Aragorn shows us Christ the King in all his glory and restoration, the story doesn't stop there.
No, it definitely doesn't.
Because the mechanics of Tolkien's world mean that Aragorn's royal authority can't actually defeat the ultimate evil. For that, the story shifts from the grand battles to the smallest, most unlikely heroes in the story, Frodo and Sam.
Right. If Aragorn shows us the reigning king, Frodo and Sam show us the agonizing, crushing reality of bearing the cross, the suffering servant.
Yeah, let's summarize that grueling journey for a second. They are crawling through the ash of Mordor. Frodo is starving, dehydrated, and the spiritual weight of the ring is literally hollowing out his identity.
He tells Sam he can't even remember the taste of food or the sound of water.
It's just brutal. But then we get to the climax at Mount Doom, and this is where it gets crazy. Frodo gets to the edge of the fire, the fate of the world is entirely in his hands, and he doesn't throw it in.
He fails.
He completely fails. He claims the ring for himself. The great hero succumbs to evil at the very last possible second. And the ring is only destroyed because Gollum violently bites off Frodo's finger and then trips and falls into the fire.
It's a shocking narrative choice, but theologically, it is a goldmine.
Walk us through that, because on the surface, you'd think a Christian author would want his hero to flawlessly resist sin to the bitter end, right?
You would think so. Yeah. But if Frodo had just grit his teeth and overpowered the ring through sheer moral willpower, it would preach a false gospel.
Oh, wow. A works-based gospel.
Exactly. It would say that if your character is just strong enough, you can defeat ultimate evil on your own. But Tolkien gives us the theology of the cross here. Frodo bearing the evil mirrors Isaiah 53, the suffering servant carrying the transgressions of others, marred beyond human likeness. And it reflects the Greek concept of kenosis, right? The self-emptying of Christ. Frodo empties himself entirely to make room for this horrific burden. But his failure at the cracks of doom, that is the ultimate illustration of 1 Corinthians 1 and 2 Corinthians 12.
My grace is sufficient for you, for my power is made perfect in weakness.
Yes. God's power, the Greek word dunamis, is made perfect in our weakness, which is asthenos. Frodo's failure is actually profound Christian comfort because it undercuts simplistic moralism.
I really want to camp out here for a second because this connects so deeply to the Christian walk. We often think God expects us to carry our burdens flawlessly all the way to the finish line.
We put so much pressure on ourselves.
We really do. We think we have to be the perfect spouse, the Christian who never struggles with doubt or hidden sin. But the reality is we frequently just collapse under the weight of our own brokenness.
We all have our own personal Mount Dooms where we just fail.
Exactly. And the comfort here is that God's sovereign grace operates even through our collapse. Our salvation doesn't depend on our flawless performance. It depends on his unseen providence intervening when our strength is gone.
That's it, exactly. And you cannot talk about this grace without talking about Samwise Gamgee.
Oh, Sam, the best friend ever.
Truly. Sam is the relational embodiment of that grace. He enacts the Hebrew concept of haste.
Remind us what haste means again.
It translates roughly to steadfast covenant love. It's a fierce, loyal love that remains even when the other person is unlovable or failing. When Frodo is breaking down and becoming cruel under the ring's influence, Sam stands by him.
Even when Frodo physically can't take another step, Sam literally picks him up and says, I can't carry it for you, but I can carry you.
It's Galatians 6 in action. Bear one another's burdens and so fulfill the law of Christ. Sam provides the human loyalty, the hesed, and then divine providence handles the final salvation when Frodo ultimately fails.
That is just incredibly beautiful. But okay, while Frodo and Sam are dealing with unseen grace in Mordor, we have to talk about what's happening with the visible war.
Right, because things are looking very bad everywhere else.
Right. How are believers supposed to endure when the darkness around them feels absolute? The success of the ring's destruction relied entirely on unseen providence, But the people in Gondor and Rohan are facing literal, massive armies of darkness.
This brings us to a concept Tolkien invented called eucatastrophe.
Eucatastrophe, that's a great word.
It really is. He combined the Greek prefix eu, meaning good, with catastrophe. It means the sudden, grace-filled reversal of apparent defeat.
Like a joyous turn when all hope is lost.
Exactly. And Tolkien actually considered the gospel itself to be the ultimate eucatastrophe. The resurrection of Christ is the sudden, joyous dawn that breaks after the absolute despair of the crucifixion.
But the thing is, to experience that eucatastrophe, you have to endure the despair first. You have to live through Saturday to get to Sunday.
And how the characters respond to that Saturday despair is deeply theological. Look at the contrast between Gandalf and Denethor during the siege of Minas Tirith.
Denethor just totally breaks down.
He does. He relies purely on worldly calculation. He looks at his seeing stone, sees the vast armies of Mordor, does the math, and concludes that victory is statistically impossible.
Right. And that worldly calculation leads him straight into despair and self-destruction. He literally abandons his post and burns himself alive.
Yes. But Gandalf, on the other hand, operates on what he calls a fool's hope.
A fool's hope. I love that.
Yeah, he says, there never was much hope, just a fool's hope, as I have been told. Denethor's calculation is worldly sight, but Gandalf's fool's hope is biblical faith. True biblical hope isn't about probability. It's about trusting the unseen goodness of God.
It makes me think of Paul saying the cross is foolishness to the world. And you see that same faithful defiance in King Theoden of Rohan. His redemption arc is just incredible.
Oh, it's one of the best parts of the book.
He starts as this withered, manipulated king who let his kingdom fall into ruin. But he's healed, he rises to save Gondor, and when he falls in battle, his dying words are just so profound.
He says, I go to my fathers, and even in their mighty company I shall not now be ashamed.
I shall not now be ashamed. If we apply that devotionally to the listener, I mean, so many of us carry the heavy guilt of our past failures. We've all had sevens where we listened to the wrong voices, neglected our responsibilities, and just let our lives slide into darkness.
And the enemy loves to use that, right? He loves to tell you that you are forever disqualified by your past sins.
Exactly. But Theoden shows us that God's grace is mightier than our past failures. When you repent and step back into obedience, you can face eternity without shame. Your past doesn't have the final word.
That is such a powerful truth. And the battle gives us another incredible picture of this, what I think we could call holy defiance. Yamasong. He sees King Theoden fall, he looks around, and they are completely surrounded. By every worldly metric, they are dead. All is lost.
And he doesn't surrender. He doesn't panic. He unsheaths his sword and starts singing.
He sings, out of doubt, out of dark, to the days rising, I came singing in the sun, sword unsheathing.
I mean, singing in the face of annihilation. It's like believers singing hymns in a hospital waiting room when they've just gotten a terrible diagnosis. Or a church gathering to worship the Sunday after a community tragedy.
Right. It makes absolutely no sense to the secular world.
None at all. It is a holy defiance against the darkness. It's not toxic positivity. It's a deep knowledge that God is still on the throne, even when we are surrounded.
And Eowyn does the exact same thing when she confronts the Witch King.
Oh man, the Witch King of Angmar.
The most terrifying entity on the battlefield. He feeds on fear and despair, and she stands between him and the fallen king, and she says, "Begone, foul Dormerlake, Lord of Carrion."
Begone, foul Dormerlake. Just the sheer audacity. You know, I want to apply this to the listener right now, because the enemy wants to keep you caged. He's been telling Eowyn her whole life she belongs in a cage, that she's too weak to fight.
Right. The world tells her she doesn't have a place on the battlefield.
And the enemy whispers those same lies to us. He tells you that your small acts of faithfulness don't matter, that you're too insignificant or too broken to be used by God. Eowyn reminds us to refuse the cage, to step into the calling God has placed on our lives and look the darkness right in the eye.
Amen to that.
So, okay, the Great War is won, the ring is destroyed, Aragorn is crowned, the music swells. If this were a movie, we'd roll the credits right here, and, well, the movies actually kind of did.
Yeah, they really smoothed over this next part.
But Tolkien doesn't end the story there in the book. He sends the 4 hobbits back to their home, the Shire.
And this is where we get to the chapter called The Scouring of the Shire, which is so crucial for understanding the Christian life.
Because they walk back into what they think is going to be this peaceful paradise, and instead, it's been completely corrupted.
Right. They return to find their home taken over by petty tyranny and industrial blight. The trees are cut down, the river is polluted, and this corrupt wizard, Saruman, going by the name Sharky, is basically running a gang of ruffians who are oppressing everyone.
It's just devastating. You've literally bled to save the entire world, and you come home to find bullies tearing up your front yard. But, this perfectly models the dual nature of Christian eschatology.
Yes, the already and the not yet.
Exactly.
Unpack that for us.
So we have the cosmic judgment, right? The fall of Sauron is like Revelation 20 through 22, the final defeat of ultimate evil. The grand victory has been secured by Christ.
The war is won.
The war is won. But we still live in the present day, and that means we have an ongoing calling to reform our immediate local communities. The grand victory doesn't mean we just sit back and relax.
Right. The hobbits realize they can't just wait for Aragorn or Gandalf to come fix their hometown. They have to use the maturity they gained out in the world to cleanse their own backyard.
The New Testament uses a great Greek term for this.
Grogere.
Rogore.
Yeah, it means to keep awake or to be watchful. You see it in Matthew 24 and 1 Peter 5, where Peter says, "Be sober-minded, be watchful. Your adversary, the devil, prowls around." The hobbits learn that peace isn't just the absence of war. It requires constant everyday vigilance.
But let me push back a little here because I think this speaks directly to a huge temptation in modern evangelicalism.
Okay, what's that?
Well, earlier in the story, Gandalf warns them, if Gondor falls, the Shire will be no refuge. And I look at our church culture today, and there's this massive urge to just retreat. We want to build our own comfortable, isolated subcultures.
We want to hide in the Shire.
Exactly. We want to homeschool our kids, only consume Christian media, and completely ignore the raging cultural fires out in Gondor. How does this narrative speak to that isolationist mindset?
It completely dismantles it. Gandalf is saying you cannot artificially isolate yourself from the world's brokenness. Our faith demands a public witness. We participate in a larger spiritual conflict, and if the big battles are lost, the little safe havens will fall too.
You could just put your head in the sand.
No, but at the same time, we have to guard the little places. We have to be faithful in our living rooms and our local churches. You can't just fight culture wars online and ignore the petty tyrannies and sins festering in your own home.
That is such a convicting balance.
Yeah.
So they rally the Shire, they drive out the ruffians, they replant the trees. The Shire is saved. But the deep dive isn't quite over, because while the Shire is healed, Frodo himself is not.
And this is where the story shifts to this really bittersweet reality.
The Grey Havens.
Yeah. Frodo has these lingering physical and spiritual wounds. He was stabbed by a Morgul blade at Weathertop. He was poisoned by the giant spider Shelob. And his soul was just battered by carrying the ring.
He literally tells Sam, I have been too deeply hurt. I tried to save the Shire, and it has been saved, but not for me. It just breaks your heart.
He realizes he can't go back to normal, and so he departs at the Grey Havens, taking a ship into the west to find a healing that just doesn't exist in Middle-earth.
And devotionally, this connects so deeply to our understanding of life between the times. Christ has won the ultimate victory, but the final consummation, the new heavens and the new earth, it's not fully here yet. And our scars are real. I feel like modern Christian culture sometimes pushes this really toxic positivity.
Oh, 100%. Just pray and smile and your trauma will vanish.
Right. If you just have enough faith, your chronic illness will go away, your depression will evaporate. And when it doesn't, we implicitly blame the person for lacking faith. But Tolkien beautifully validates that some wounds don't heal in this life.
Paul talks about this in 2 Corinthians 4. He says, we have this treasure in jars of clay. We are afflicted and struck down. But he contrasts that with an eternal weight of glory. The Greek word for glory there is doxa.
Doxa.
Yeah, it's this radiant, heavy reality of eternity that far outweighs our present suffering. Frodo's unhealed wounds reflect St. Augustine's idea that our souls are restless until they find their true homeland in God.
We are longing for Revelation 21, where God will ultimately wipe away every tear. But until then, the tears are real.
And they are valid. At the Grey Havens, as everyone is weeping because Frodo is leaving, Gandalf says, I will not say, do not weep, for not all tears are an evil.
Not all tears are an evil.
It's incredible. Christ himself wept at Lazarus' tomb, right? He knew he was about to raise him, but he still wept. Grieving the brokenness of this world isn't a lack of faith. It's a heart that takes love and eternity seriously.
Wow. A heart that takes love and eternity seriously. What a perfect summary of this entire journey.
It really is.
I mean, let's just briefly recap what we've walked through today. We started by seeing Christ the Restorer reflected in Aragorn, right?
Oh, yeah.
Redefining true leadership as healing.
Then we looked at relying entirely on grace through Frodo's ultimate weakness at Mount Doom.
We talked about embracing a fool's hope and holy defiance against despair, like Eomer and Eowyn. We saw the need to fight faithfully in our own local shires, our own living rooms.
And finally, embracing the reality of our scars while we long for our eternal home.
It's just so much deeper than elves and magic rings. So, to you, the listener, as we wrap up, I want to challenge you to take these truths into your week. Guard the little places in your life. Step out of whatever cage the enemy has put you in. And live today as someone who is already recommended and redeemed by the true King.
And if I can just leave everyone with one final kind of provocative thought to mull over.
Yeah, please do.
We often dismiss Middle-earth as just a fantasy or a myth, but think about Ephesians 6. The Apostle Paul tells us that our struggle is not against flesh and blood, but against the cosmic powers over this present darkness, against the spiritual forces of evil in the heavenly places.
Right.
So what if Tolkien's world, a world where invisible spiritual forces are constantly at war, where every single moral choice echoes into eternity, and where unseen grace is always actively working? What if that world is actually a more realistic depiction of our daily lives than the cynical, purely materialistic world we see on the evening news?
Oh, man. That just gives you chills. It really changes how you see your own daily life.
It really does.
Well, thank you so much for guiding us through this. And to the listener, thank you for joining us on this deep dive. We hope it inspired you and deepened your faith. We'll see you next time.